The town of Prince Rupert sits here on Cayen Island, and to get here, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway had completed the second biggest engineering project in the world at the time, only behind the Panama Canal. The Grand Trunk Pacific was backed by Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier, and his government would fund a railway completed from Moncton, New Brunswick into Winnipeg, which would finish in 1906, and Charles Melville Hayes would take over from there, going west via Melville, Saskatchewan and Edmonton, Alberta, into the Rockies of Jasper, and finally punching through to the Pacific in 1914. And this route would traverse some of the most stunning scenery on Earth, which I covered in depth in last week's video taking the route to get here. They drive home the last spike on April 7th of 1914, and by now Prince Rupert, which was previously a giant rainforest, had been completely cleared and was ready for development, as you see here. But 2 years earlier, Hayes was in Europe to secure more funding for the Grand Trunk Pacific, and more importantly, secure a deal with the White Star Line to have them bring passengers over the Atlantic to ride a Grand Trunk Pacific passenger train across Canada. He was heading back to attend the grand opening of the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa, which was the first of 8 hotels he had planned across the country. And this list included the Fort Garry in Winnipeg, which would open the following year in December of 1913, the Hotel Macdonald in Edmonton, which opened in July of 1915, and he also had planned the Chateau Coupel in Regina, Chateau Myatt in Jasper, Chateau Mount Robson, Chateau Prince George, and the grandest of them all, the biggest and the most luxurious, Chateau Prince Rupert. A chateau-style hotel with a 15-story central tower and 2 adjacent 12-story wings, with 450 guest rooms towering above Cayen Island. And for context, that's pretty much the same number of rooms that the Hotel Vancouver has today, which opened in 1939, and may have stolen some inspiration from the Chateau Prince Rupert, but that's another story for another video. Grand Trunk had planned to host a grand passenger station below at the waterfront, as well as a steamship terminal for passengers arriving from Asia. But one of his downfalls was that he refused to cut costs anywhere. From blasting the routes to the quality of steel that he would use on the track that they would lay, Hayes would compromise for nothing and for no man, and he wanted the best. But he would never see any of his vision completed, because on his way back for the Chateau Laurier's grand opening, the ship that he took back was the Titanic. And although he was there to get a deal done and experience the best that the White Star Line had to offer, he would perish that night at 2 a.m. on April 15th of 1912. And after his passing, his successors were hungry to cut costs and keep the railway afloat. And although they had dug the foundation for all 8 hotels, they would scrap every single one of them except for the Hotel Macdonald. They would never build a passenger station in Prince Rupert and would go bankrupt in 1920 and absorb into the newly formed Canadian National Railways that year. Now, Canadian National absorbed close to 100 railways, but when they opted to make the Canadian Northern Railway route from Jasper to Vancouver their main line over Prince Rupert, in hindsight, when Hayes perished on the Titanic, so did the dream of Prince Rupert that night, as well as the entire original furniture order for the Chateau Laurier, which is a true story and still sits somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean today, which I covered in a previous episode if you want to learn more about it.